Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, who wastes no time in taking on the Washington establishment, has really raised eyebrows with his criticism over this battle regarding a relatively unknown federal agency, the Export-Import Bank. But Senator Cruz, as is his custom, has touched a nerve with spotlighting what is the problem with congressional leadership. We are very honored to start the hour being joined on our guest line by Republican candidate for president in 2016. I'm going to see him in a few weeks in Columbus, Ohio at the big Defending the American Dream Summit put on by Americans for Prosperity. Senator Ted Cruz, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Mike, it's always great to be with you.
Always great to have you. There are people who have said, wow, Ted Cruz called Mitch McConnell out. Is very upset about this controversy over this Washington institution that has become synonymous with cronyism and corruption, the Export-Import Bank. Any regrets about saying that you were basically deceived about the Republican leadership's plan to extend the life of this thing?
Absolutely not. Mike, what I've endeavored to do every day I've been serving is two things. Number one, tell the truth. And number two, do what I said I would do. There is right now a massive divide. People are frustrated. We were told a number of years ago, if only we could get a Republican House, then things would be better. So in 2010, people rose up in massive numbers. We got a Republican House. Very little changed. Then we were told the problem is the Senate. It's Harry Reid. If only we could get a Republican Senate. Well, in 2014, millions of Americans rose up. We won an historic election. And what happened? In the last 6 months, first thing the Republican majority did, we came back and passed a $1 trillion omnibus bill filled with corporate pork and welfare. Then the Republican majority funded Obamacare, funded President Obama's executive amnesty, and then Republican leadership forced through the confirmation of Loretta Lynch as Attorney General.
Right.
Now, every one of those is exactly identical to what would have happened under Harry Reid and the Democrats. It's why I refer to what we're seeing today as the McConnell-Reid leadership team, because their priorities are the same. They're fighting for the same party. It is the party of Washington. What we saw this week on the Senate floor is the McConnell-Reid leadership team fighting arm in arm in complete harmony to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, which, as you noted, is a classic example of corporate welfare and cronyism. It is taxpayers on the hook for hundreds of billions of dollars of loan guarantees paid out to a handful of giant corporations. Now, all the lobbyists in Washington support it, but at the same time, the McConnell-Reid leadership team blocked Republican amendments on actual priorities voters care about, things like defunding Planned Parenthood. The McConnell-Reid leadership team was Republican leadership that stopped a vote on defunding Planned Parenthood. Things like stopping sanctuary cities, passing Kate's Law, repealing the congressional exemption from Obamacare, stopping the Iran deal until they recognize Israel and release our hostages. All of those were amendments I introduced. Every one of those was blocked by Republican leadership because they're listening to lobbyists in Washington and not the courageous conservatives across this country who gave us the majority.
Let's get, if we can, into the specifics of what you've said. That behind closed doors, Senator McConnell had assured Republicans that there was no deal with the supporters of this Export-Import Bank. And you say then that basically he did an about face. McConnell has remained silent on your claim and your accusation, Senator. But yet your colleague from Texas, Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn, has rejected your assertion and said that you are mistaken. There was no misrepresentation made by the majority leader. What do you think of what Senator Cornyn is saying about Mitch McConnell's remarks?
Yeah, well, there's a pattern to how Washington operates, and it's what I refer to as the Washington cartel. The Washington cartel consists of career politicians in both parties who get in bed with lobbyists and special interests and grow and grow and grow government. On Friday of last week, I gave an unusual floor speech where I stood up and I just described what is happening in Washington behind closed doors. And as you noted, this started back in May when Congress was debating TPA, Trade Promotion Authority. And in the midst of that, it appeared that leadership had cut a deal with the proponents of the Export-Import Bank. There was a big huddle on the Senate floor. It sure looked like a deal was cut. The people who wanted it said they got a deal. So the next day at the Senate Republican lunch, I stood up and I asked Mitch McConnell directly. I said, Mitch, it looked like a deal was cut yesterday.
Right.
What exactly was the deal? Now, he was furious with me for asking.
Because you talk about tipping over a sacred cow. This is what you're doing, right? When you talk about what goes on behind closed doors, that's verboten in Washington, isn't it?
Well, and as you know, I have a new book that came out a few weeks ago called A Time for Truth, which is all about telling the truth about what happens in Washington behind closed doors. Right. I do that both from my time as a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court, what actually occurs at the Supreme Court, particularly in the wake of these horrible decisions we saw just a month ago, but also I take readers inside Senate lunches. If you've ever wondered what is happening behind closed doors, that's what the book, A Time for Truth, is all about, is shining the light on the corruption. Why is it? We're so frustrated. We elect people. They sound good on the campaign trail. Why do they sell us out? That's what the book, A Time for Truth is.
And it's a fascinating read because it gives us a look into a Washington, D.C. that we rarely see. But again, I got to believe that when we talk about the establishment party, when we talk about establishment types in Washington, D.C., they can't possibly be happy that you're saying these things.
They are not, and the standard pattern is that leadership sends out their surrogates to attack you, and they do it through various ways. Mm-hmm. They, number one, send out a number of senior leadership allies to issue attack after attack after attack, and they plant stories, they hammer stories. That's one of the things, actually, Chapter 1 of the book, A Time for Truth, describes the fight over the debt ceiling, and there are a lot of similarities to that fight and what we just saw. The title of the chapter is Mendacity, because it describes how Republican leadership asked every Republican to affirmatively consent to lower the threshold for Harry Reid to take up the debt ceiling from 60 votes to 50 votes,
right,
to make it easier for Barack Obama and Harry Reid to spend trillions of dollars and get us deeper and deeper in debt. And the reason leadership told us they wanted to do it was, number one, they said we all supported that substantively, but number two, if we lowered the threshold, we could all vote no and tell our constituents we opposed
right.
the thing we had just consented to allow.
The thing you just agreed to allow to happen. Senator Ted Cruz is with us here on the Mike Gallagher Show. I got an email last night from a lady in California who pointed something out that I thought was very revealing. She said there's all this focus on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is popular because he's taking on the Washington establishment, and it's not going to be business as usual. And yet, there is a guy in the race who's been doing this from the day he went to Washington to fight, and he has a track record as a United States Senator, and his name is Ted Cruz. You have taken what I believe to be the absolute perfect approach with Donald Trump. I don't understand why Republicans want to roll around and name call and raise their voices. Just let Donald Trump speak for Donald Trump on that debate stage in a couple of weeks. I don't know why it's an indictment of you when you say I'm not going to attack a fellow Republican who's running like this. But I think she makes a point that the idea of taking on the establishment, you're proving it with what you've said about this Export-Import Bank business with McConnell and Reid, and you've done this your whole career.
Well, that's exactly what I've tried to do, and I think the central issue in the Republican primary is going to be trust. We have seen campaign conservatives who talk about how they're conservative, but I think primary voters are looking for a consistent conservative, and in particular, I think the question they're going to ask is, show me, not just when have you stood up to Democrats. It's easy for a Republican to say they're standing up to Democrats.
Right.
When have you stood up to your own party? When have you stood up to Republican leadership and the Washington cartel? And when you do, you pay the price. You're vilified by Democrats, by Republicans, and by the media But we're not going to turn this country around unless we have a leader, a president, who can stand up to the Washington cartel. We saw that in Ronald Reagan, and the Washington cartel vilified him. Republican leadership hated Reagan.
Right.
And one of the things this past week really underscores, Mike, is the critical importance of a strong Republican president, because we're not going to turn this country around from Congress. The cartel is too strong. But I'll tell you this, if I'm elected president, this will change. I am not running to manage the corruption of Washington. I am running to change Washington with the power of the people. So, for example, on corporate welfare and cronyism, if I'm president, I'll make very clear to leadership, if you pass it, I will veto it. On issues that matter to the American people, like ending sanctuary cities, like defunding Planned Parenthood, like stopping this terrible Iran deal, like fundamental tax reform, like repealing Obamacare. As president, I will lead the fight to do every one of those. And just like Reagan did, how did he overcome Tip O'Neill and the Democrats in Congress? He took the case to the American people, and they rose up in such numbers that it forced Congress to listen. And a great amount of that can be done within the executive by a strong president. But here's the difference. If you have a president who's scared of the cartel, who's scared of the criticism, doesn't want Republicans and Democrats in the press criticizing him, then we'll have a Republican president who doesn't use executive power to end the abuses of the Obama administration. I think we need someone who has a proven record of standing up and honoring the promises. When I tell you I will do something, I will follow through, and that's what I've done every day.
I got to believe you're excited about and very, very much looking forward to taking that debate stage in a couple of weeks. Noted Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz once called you off the charts brilliant. Many people believe this debate stage is where Ted Cruz is gonna really have a pretty profound opportunity to share his message with the American people.
Well, Mike, I'm very much looking forward to the debates coming up in a couple of weeks. I think it will be good. I think the debate is ongoing every day.
Sure.
And it's a debate there are a lot of voices in Washington who say the way we win is we run to the mushy middle. We do what the Washington cartel did this week. We pay off the lobbyists. We grow government. We don't stand for anything. There are a lot of folks it's interesting in the Republican primary field. We had an epic battle this week to defund Planned Parenthood. We had an epic battle this week to end sanctuary cities. And an awful lot of the Republican candidates were nowhere to be found.
Senator Ted Cruz, I'm going to see you in Columbus in a couple of weeks for the big Defending the American Dream Summit. Our listeners can come too. You can go to defendingthedream.com right now, defendingthedream.com, if you want to go August 21st, 22nd, and see Senator Ted Cruz in person. Thanks, Senator. Keep fighting a good fight. I appreciate always your time.
Thank you, Mike. God bless you. And the website is tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org.
tedcruz.org. Senator Ted Cruz on the Mike Gallagher Show.